A millionaire returns earlier than expected and catches a scene with his son that no money in the world could have bought. From that moment, everything begins to change, but not as you imagine. The Austin sky was beginning to turn orange when the private jet landed. Matthew Harrison loosened his Italian tie, feeling the weight of 3 intense days of negotiations in London. The trip had been cut in half thanks to his skill in closing deals. The businessman at 42 ran one of the largest technology companies in America, Harrison Tech, specializing in artificial intelligence applied to healthcare. Ironically, all his expertise in developing advanced medical solutions couldn't solve the problem that troubled him most: his son, Lucas's congenital condition. "Straight home, Tony," he said to the driver waiting for him at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. In the back seat of the black SUV, Matthew checked his latest messages, responded to urgent emails, and finally allowed himself a moment of silence. The mansion in Westlake Hills, an upscale neighborhood in the city, wasn't exactly where he felt at home. It was more a symbol of his success, a spacious and impeccable place, but lacking that human warmth that only a united family could provide. Since the departure of Maria, his ex-wife who had abandoned their marriage when Lucas was just 1 year old, unable to cope with the child's special needs, Matthew had immersed himself in work. He compensated for her absence with expensive gifts and a team of professionals hired to care for the boy. Pediatrician, physical therapist, nutritionist, nannies in alternating shifts, all highly qualified and equally distant. Employees, not family. "We've arrived, sir," announced Tony, interrupting his thoughts. Matthew looked out the window. His house seemed strangely quiet for a time when all staff should still be on duty. "Thank you, Tony. You can go home now." "I don't need you anymore today." The driver nodded, surprised by the early dismissal, something rare from his workaholic boss. Matthew took his briefcase and small carry-on bag, declining assistance. He intended to enter discreetly, perhaps surprising Lucas before bedtime. He crossed the immaculate garden, opened the door with his own key and left his luggage in the entrance hall. The silence intrigued him. Normally, Rosa, the housekeeper, would greet him with her traditional "Welcome home, Dr. Harrison," followed by a detailed report about the house. Dave, the security guard, usually made his rounds at this time. Mrs. Wilson should be preparing dinner in the kitchen, but there was no sign of anyone. He walked down the corridor leading to the main room, his steps muffled by the Persian carpet. That's when he heard it, a soft melody almost hypnotic coming from the living room. It was a children's song, the kind that cradles dreams. Matthew slowed his pace, moved by curiosity. As he approached the entrance to the room, he saw without being noticed a scene that froze him in place. In the center of the large beige carpet, Lucas was standing, not with his usual crutches, not leaning on furniture or walls, simply standing, with his small arms extended to the sides, like a tightrope. Walker. His concentrated expression revealed the tremendous effort he was making. Kneeling a few steps away, a young brunette woman was observing the boy's every movement. Matthew vaguely recognized her. She was the new nanny, hired a few weeks ago on his secretary's recommendation. What was her name again? Caroline? Christina? No, Emily Rivera. She was holding a cell phone, apparently timing how long Lucas could maintain his balance. Her hands were strategically positioned, ready to support the boy if necessary, but without touching him. Her brown eyes conveyed serene confidence, almost professional. "You've got this, Lucas. 10 more seconds," she whispered with gentle firmness. "Breathe deeply. Remember what we talked about regarding your body's center." The boy bit his lower lip, determined. His fragile legs were visibly trembling, but he remained steady, surpassing limits that Matthew believed were impossible. The best specialists had been categorical. Lucas would depend on support to get around, probably for his entire life. When the phone's timer beeped softly, Emily smiled. "Perfect. We've beaten our record. 30 complete seconds." Lucas's legs finally gave way, but before he touched the ground, Emily supported him skillfully, as if she had done it hundreds of times before. Instead of frustration at having fallen, the boy's face lit up with a smile of victory. "I did it, Em, I did it," he exclaimed, hugging her with all the strength his little arms allowed. The young woman returned the hug with genuine affection, not that professional and measured affection that Matthew was accustomed to seeing in other nannies. "You were amazing, champion," she replied, fixing the boy's dark hair. "Tomorrow we'll try for 35 seconds, and after you rest we can do the strengthening exercises we talked about." Matthew involuntarily took a step forward, making the floorboard creak. The two immediately turned in his direction. Emily's face paled slightly, as if she'd been caught doing something forbidden. Lucas, on the other hand, exploded with joy. "Daddy! You came home early," he shouted, trying to stand up again, this time accepting Emily's help to get to his feet. "Look what I can do. Look!" Matthew remained motionless, torn between the joy of seeing his son's enthusiasm and the discomfort of the situation he had witnessed. Who was this young woman to assume such responsibility? What qualifications did she have to conduct what appeared to be clandestine physical therapy? "Good evening, Lucas," he finally replied, approaching to hug his son. Then he addressed the nanny in a controlled voice. "Miss Rivera, I didn't expect to find you active at this hour." Emily stood up, nervously adjusting her simple uniform, jeans and a white t-shirt with the nanny agency's logo. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison. We didn't know you would be returning today." She maintained a professional posture, but her eyes betrayed a certain nervousness. "Mrs. Rosa had to leave early to handle a family emergency and asked me to stay with Lucas until the night nanny arrived." Matthew then noticed an open notebook on the side table. Pages filled with meticulous notes, drawings of body positions, tables with dates and times, everything extremely organized and with a technical aspect, something far beyond what would be expected from a simple caregiver. "Daddy, Emily is teaching me to stand on my own," exclaimed Lucas, interrupting the growing tension. "She says I'll soon be able to take steps without crutches inside the house." Matthew looked at his son, then at the nanny, and finally at the notebook of notes. Years of negotiation experience had taught him not to make hasty decisions. Something was happening in his home without his knowledge, but before judging he needed to understand. "Lucas, it's almost time for your bath. Why don't you go with—" He hesitated, realizing that he didn't know who else was in the house. "Mrs. Wilson is in the kitchen preparing dinner," Emily completed, sensing his doubt. "I can ask her to help Lucas with his bath while you rest from your trip." Matthew nodded, still processing the situation. As Emily left the room to call the cook, he knelt in front of his son. "Do you like these activities with Miss Rivera?" Lucas's eyes shone in a way that Matthew rarely saw. "She's the best, Dad. She says I'm strong like a superhero inside. I just need to discover my powers." In that moment, Matthew knew he needed to observe more before acting. Something different was happening, something that made his son smile like he hadn't seen him do in a long time. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. In the following days, Matthew discreetly reorganized his schedule. He cancelled a lunch with investors, postponed a meeting with the development team, and started coming home earlier. All without prior notice. He wanted to observe the routine that had been established in his absence. The mansion had a sophisticated security system with cameras in various areas. Matthew had never bothered to check the recordings, delegating that function to the head of security. Now, however, he spent hours in his office reviewing the images from recent months since Emily's arrival. What he discovered left him speechless. The young woman not only took care of Lucas's food, hygiene, and entertainment. She had a method. Every morning before breakfast, she performed specific stretches with the boy. During bath time, she transformed the moment into improvised hydrotherapy. The games in the living room or garden were carefully selected to develop balance, muscle strength, and coordination. "This is physical therapy," Matthew murmured to himself, watching Emily help Lucas balance on a soft cushion. But what qualifications does she have for this? Determined to find out more, Matthew activated his network of contacts. In less than 24 hours, he had a complete dossier on Emily Rivera, 25 years old, from San Antonio, Texas. The young woman came from a simple family. Her father, who had died in a work accident at the factory where he was an operator, had left his wife Mrs. Clara with 2 children to raise. Emily, the eldest, and Matthew, 3 years younger, who was born with a form of cerebral palsy that primarily affected his lower limbs. Without resources for private therapies, Emily accompanied her brother to sessions offered at the public hospital. Attentive and curious, she had begun to reproduce the exercises at home. Gradually, she developed her own techniques, adapted to the simple reality in which they lived. When she had to drop out of her education degree to help with expenses, she transformed her empirical knowledge into a profession, working as a nanny specializing in children with special needs. Matthew closed the folder, thoughtful. The young woman had no diploma in physical therapy, occupational therapy, or any health field. Her knowledge came from practical experience and years of observation. To his Cartesian mind, this seemed insufficient, even reckless. How could he allow someone without formal qualifications to interfere with his son's condition? That afternoon, pretending to work in his office, Matthew left the door ajar to observe the playtime session that Emily was conducting with Lucas. The boy was sitting on the floor in the living room, on a colorful carpet with numbers and letters. "Today, we're going to play Treasure Island," explained Emily, spreading small objects around the carpet. "Each treasure you manage to grab is worth a point, but you need to move without your crutches. You can only support yourself on the islands." She pointed to some strategically positioned cushions. "Can I use my hands on the floor?" asked Lucas, already analyzing the challenge. "Yes, like a pirate. Swimming between islands," she replied enthusiastically, "but ideally try to stay on your knees or even stand up, holding onto the islands. Remember our training yesterday? That strength you found in your legs?" Lucas nodded, determined. What followed was a 40-minute session in which the boy, between laughter and small frustrations overcome, developed strategies to move around the space. Matthew realized that, without noticing, his son was strengthening muscles, practicing balance, and, most importantly, developing self-confidence. At the end of the game, Emily meticulously noted the progress in her notebook. 6 minutes in the kneeling position without support, 2 moments of balance standing, while holding support with just one hand, 4-point movement for 2 meters without pause. "I want to show Dad when he gets home," exclaimed Lucas, proud. "He'll definitely be very happy to see your progress," replied Emily, putting away the materials. "Now let's rest a bit before snack time. How about choosing a book?" Matthew silently retreated into his office, avoiding being seen. Something in his chest tightened. When was the last time Lucas had shown so much enthusiasm to share something with him? When had his son stopped trying to impress him, accustomed to his chronic absence? During dinner, he observed Lucas with new eyes. The boy ate with more ease, sitting in his adapted chair. Before, Matthew had considered his son's limitations as something defined, unchangeable. Now he was beginning to see possibilities. "Dad, did you know I can stay on my knees by myself for 6 minutes?" Lucas commented between bites. "Really, that's impressive, son." Matthew felt the weight of the word. It was truly impressive. The doctors had said that Lucas's motor development would always be limited, that certain skills might never be achieved. "Emily says soon I'll be able to walk holding on to just one hand. Then I can play ball with you." Matthew swallowed hard. Playing ball. Such a simple activity, so fundamental to the relationship between fathers and sons, and one he had never considered possible with Lucas. "That would be great, son." That night, after putting Lucas to bed, Matthew found Emily in the kitchen. She was organizing the boy's lunchbox for the next day, separating fruits and preparing a whole grain sandwich that she was cutting into fun shapes. "Miss Rivera, can we talk for a moment?" Emily seemed tense but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Harrison." They sat at the breakfast table, a space rarely used by Matthew, who usually ate meals in restaurants or in his office. "I've been observing your work with Lucas," he began, direct as was his style. "The exercises, the techniques you apply. These are methods that seem like physical therapy, but from what I know, you don't have training in the field." Emily straightened her shoulders. There was no arrogance in her gesture, only dignity. You're right. I don't have a degree in physical therapy. My knowledge comes from experience with my brother, who has a condition similar to Lucas's. She paused, choosing her words. I know I should have talked to you before implementing these activities, but I saw so much potential in Lucas, so much desire to overcome limits. What exactly do you believe you can achieve with him? Interrupted Matthew, his tone more curious than accusatory. Emily's eyes shone with conviction. Lucas has much more capacity than the doctors predicted. I'm not saying he doesn't have real limitations, but there's room for significant advancement. With proper and consistent stimulation, I believe he can develop much greater independence. Based on what? Intuition. On systematic observation, Mr. Harrison, Emily opened her notebook of notes, showing pages and pages of detailed records. I monitor every muscular response, every small progress. I adapt the exercises according to the results. It's not intuition, it's method. I may not have a degree, but I have 15 years of accompanying my brother in therapies, studying on my own, testing what works. Matthew examined the notes, impressed, with the level of detail. There were even small drawings illustrating positions and exercises. Why do you work as a nanny? With this knowledge, you could have pursued a career in healthcare. A shadow passed over Emily's face. Not all of us have that privilege, sir. I had to abandon college in my second year to help my mother when she fell ill. Between studying and putting food on the table, the choice was simple. The businessman nodded, understanding. He himself had come from humble origins, though his professional success and years living among the elite had softened those memories. What you do with Lucas, is it safe? Is there no risk of worsening his condition? I would never do anything that would put him at risk, she responded firmly. Each exercise is carefully designed for his specific case. I respect his limits, celebrate small victories. The main goal isn't to make him walk perfectly, but to develop as much autonomy as possible, and most importantly, self-confidence. Matthew drummed his fingers on the table, thoughtful. Part of him, the pragmatic executive, wanted to request reports, consult specialists, follow protocols. Another part, the father who rarely allowed himself to be, was amazed at the results already obtained. I need to think about this, he finally said. Continue the work for now, but I want daily reports, and if possible, I want to watch some of these sessions. It would be my pleasure, sir, replied Emily, a slight smile appearing on her face. Lucas will be happy to show his father what he has been learning. When she left, Matthew remained in the silent breakfast nook, reflecting. For years, he had delegated his son's care to renowned professionals who promised to keep his condition stable. He had never considered the possibility of real progress. And now, a young woman without academic training, driven by personal experience and dedication, was achieving what expensive specialists didn't accomplish. What else have I missed? By not being present? He murmured to himself, feeling the weight of years of absence concentrated in that question. A week passed since the conversation between Matthew and Emily. The businessman, contradicting his own routines, had cancelled a trip to San Francisco and delegated more responsibilities to his operations director, Renata Vasquez. The official justification was the need to closely monitor the development of a new project. The truth, however, lay in the moments he spent observing the stimulation sessions that Emily conducted with Lucas. On that sunny Saturday morning, something unprecedented happened in the Harrison mansion. Matthew got up early, dressed casually, jeans and a t-shirt, something rare in his wardrobe dominated by suits, and knocked on Lucas's door even before breakfast. "Good morning, champion," he said to the boy who was rubbing his eyes, surprised by his father's early visit. "How about we have breakfast together today? I'm in the mood for pancakes. You like pancakes, don't you?" The sleepy face of Lucas lit up. "With chocolate syrup?" "With chocolate syrup," confirmed Matthew, feeling a pang as he realized he wasn't entirely sure of his own son's preferences. It had been Emily who had mentioned, days before, the boy's love for pancakes with chocolate syrup. In the kitchen, they found Mrs. Wilson already preparing breakfast. The cook, a woman in her 60s who had worked for the Harrisons since before. Lucas's birth couldn't hide her surprise at seeing boss and son together at that hour. "Dr. Harrison, you here so early? Did something happen?" "I just woke up wanting to have breakfast with my son, Mrs. Wilson." He smiled, something he rarely did in the presence of employees. "Can I help with the pancakes?" The cook's astonished expression was worth the moment. In 5 years of work, she had never seen the boss offer to do any domestic task. Matthew Harrison, the man who commanded hundreds of employees and moved millions in negotiations, now asked if he could help make pancakes. "So sure, doctor. You can mix the batter while I prepare the syrup." Lucas was watching everything from his special seat, his eyes wide with curiosity. Seeing his father in the kitchen with sleeves rolled up was like discovering a new person inside that always busy and distant man. It was in this unusual setting that Emily entered the kitchen, ready to start her shift. She wore jeans, comfortable, sneakers and a simple blouse, practical clothes for activities with Lucas. She paused at the door, surprised by the domestic scene. "Good morning," she greeted hesitantly. "Excuse me, I didn't know you." "Would be cooking." Matthew turned, a wooden spoon in his hand and a slight embarrassment on his face. "Miss Rivera, good morning. We're making pancakes. Would you like to join us?" Emily looked at Lucas, who was waving enthusiastically, then at Mrs. Wilson, who seemed equally perplexed, and finally at Matthew, whose invitation sounded so out of character. "It would be my pleasure," she responded, approaching. "Can I help in any way?" Breakfast unfolded in a surprisingly light atmosphere. Lucas chatted about his favorite cartoons. Emily commented with knowledge, the fruit of hours watching the same programs with the boy, and Matthew absorbed every bit of information like someone discovering a parallel universe that had always existed alongside him, but that he had never bothered to explore. "After breakfast, we can have our session in the garden, taking advantage of the sun," suggested Emily to Lucas. "What do you think about practicing those steps we started yesterday?" "Yes." The boy almost knocked over his juice glass with enthusiasm. Then he looked at his father. "Dad's going to watch too." Matthew hesitated for only a moment. "If it won't be a bother, I'd like to follow along. Maybe even participate." The smile that Lucas gave was worth more than all the contracts Matthew had ever signed in his life. The back garden of the mansion was spacious and well-maintained, with a perfect lawn and a covered, heated pool. Emily had transformed a section of the lawn into a kind of activity circuit, with cushions, balls of different sizes and textures, and colorful markings on the ground. "Let's start with the warm-up," she explained, helping Lucas sit on the grass. "First we stretch the muscles, then we do strength exercises, and only then do we move on to balance and movement challenges." Matthew watched, fascinated by the clear and structured methodology. Emily knew exactly what she was doing. Each movement had a purpose. Each stimulus aimed to develop a specific skill. Even more impressive was the way she transformed potentially boring exercises into fun games. "Now, Lucas, let's show your father how you can get on your knees and reach the toys." She positioned some colorful objects at different distances. "Remember our strategy. First stability, then movement." The boy nodded with seriousness, concentrating on the task. With visible effort, but also surprising technique, he managed to rise onto his knees and maintain his balance. "Amazing," murmured Matthew, genuinely impressed. "Now it's your turn to help," said Emily, inviting him to participate. "You can position yourself there as a support point for when he needs it." Matthew knelt on the grass, feeling the expensive fabric of his jeans in contact with the earth, something that would normally bother him, but that now seemed completely irrelevant. Following Emily's instructions, he became part of the session, sometimes as physical support, sometimes as an encourager. For the first time, father and son worked together toward a goal. Matthew, the man who solved complex business problems daily, was now learning to solve much more fundamental challenges, like helping Lucas develop strength in his back muscles or maintain balance for a few more seconds. When they finished, almost 2 hours later, Matthew was sweaty and had grass stains on his knees but incredibly satisfied. Lucas, exhausted but radiant, took a well-deserved nap after lunch. "Thank you for including me," said Matthew to Emily as they had coffee on the porch, taking advantage of the boy's rest time. "I never imagined that I could participate so actively." "You are a fundamental part of the process," she replied, her professional tone mixed with genuine conviction. "The emotional support of the family, especially the parents, is as important as the physical work. Lucas tries twice as hard when he knows you're watching." The observation hit Matthew like a punch to the stomach. How many times had Lucas tried to impress him, and he had been too busy to notice? "You seem to understand my son better than I." "Too?" he admitted, a trace of bitterness in his voice. "It's not a question of understanding better or worse," Emily gently corrected. "It's a matter of perspective and shared time. You see Lucas as your son, with all the emotional complexity and expectations that involves. I see him as a child with immense potential, without the weight of those other layers." Matthew reflected on her words. There was wisdom there, an understanding of human dynamics that went beyond Emily's age or academic training. "You said you have a brother with a condition similar to Lucas's." Yes, Michael, he's 22 now." "And how is he? Did he manage to progress?" A proud smile illuminated Emily's face. "Michael is studying computer science at UT Austin. He takes the bus to college, lives alone in an adapted student apartment. He uses canes for longer distances, but can move without support in familiar environments." Matthew felt a flame of hope light in his chest. "Do you think Lucas could reach that level of independence?" "Each case is unique, Mr. Harrison. But, yes, I believe Lucas has potential for a much more autonomous life than the doctors predicted. What he needs is consistency, appropriate stimulation, and, most importantly, people who believe in him." The conversation was interrupted by Matthew's phone. It was Renata, his operations director, with an emergency at the office. An important client was threatening to break the contract due to a technical problem. Matthew looked at the device, then at the half-open door of the room where Lucas was sleeping, feeling the familiar conflict between work and family. "I need to resolve this," he said, more to himself than to Emily. "I understand." Her tone was neutral, without judgment. "Lucas will probably sleep for another hour. When he wakes up, we'll do some light cognitive activities." Matthew nodded, already typing a response to Renata. He was about to enter executive mode when he paused. "Can we continue this conversation later? About Michael, about what you did to help him?" "Of course," replied Emily, slight surprise in her eyes. "I'll be here until 7. As Matthew headed to his office, he couldn't help but notice how the mansion seemed different now. The same spaces that before seemed merely functional, a place to sleep and occasionally work, were now beginning to gain deeper meanings. The garden wasn't just a landscaping element, but a therapeutic space. The kitchen wasn't just where meals were prepared, but where memories could be built. Seated before his computer, resolving the crisis with habitual efficiency, Matthew realized that something fundamental was changing within him. The priority he had always given to work, the way he had structured his life around the company, all of this was being silently questioned. At 5 in the afternoon, the crisis resolved, he found himself doing something unprecedented, ending his workday on a Saturday to return to his son's company. There were still many questions in his mind about Emily, about her unconventional methods, about the limits of what could be achieved. But for the first time in years, Matthew Harrison was willing to put those doubts in the background, to simply be present. Returning to the living room, he found Lucas and Emily engaged in an adapted memory game, which required not only reasoning but also controlled movements to turn the cards. The boy raised his eyes when his father entered and smiled, as if his presence was the most natural thing in the world. "Dad, do you want to play too? I'm beating Emily?" Matthew smiled back, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Of course I do. Get ready, because I have the memory of an elephant." As he joined them on the living room floor, he noticed Emily's discreet but approving look. Something was being born there, not just new muscles in Lucas's legs, but also new bonds in a family that, for a long time, had existed only on paper. The quarterly consultation with Dr. Henry Mitchell, the pediatric neurologist who had been following Lucas since his diagnosis, was scheduled for 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Normally, Matthew would send his driver with the nanny and his son, receiving a brief report afterward. This time, however, he made a point of going personally. "What a pleasant surprise, Matthew," commented the doctor when he saw him in the waiting room. Henry and Matthew had studied together in college before following different professional paths. "I haven't seen you at a consultation since... when exactly?" "More than a year, I believe," admitted Matthew, feeling uncomfortable with the realization. Emily remained discreetly beside Lucas, who was leafing through a children's magazine. "I thought it important to accompany this consultation. We've observed some progress that I'd like to discuss with you." The doctor raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "Progress? Interesting. Let's go in then." In the spacious and well-lit office, Dr. Henry began the routine evaluation, checking reflexes, muscle tone, range of motion. Matthew watched attentively, now noticing details he had previously ignored. "Lucas, can you stand for me? Use your crutches, please," asked the doctor. The boy looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. Instead of using the crutches, Lucas extended his hands to the nanny, who helped him stand but without offering continuous support. To the doctor's surprise, the boy managed to keep his balance for almost a minute, just lightly holding onto Emily's extended fingers. "Impressive," murmured Dr. Henry, observing with clinical attention. The last evaluation indicated that Lucas couldn't sustain his own weight without complete support for more than 10 seconds. "I can show." "You more, doctor," exclaimed Lucas, excited. "Emily, can I show the steps?" Emily looked at the doctor, silently asking permission. He nodded, curious. With minimal support from the nanny, Lucas took 4 wobbly but determined steps before needing more support. "We started with structured exercises 2 months ago," explained Emily, helping Lucas sit down. "At first, the focus was just muscle strengthening and proprioception. In recent weeks, we've evolved to balance and small movements." Dr. Henry listened with a neutral expression, but his eyes didn't hide his surprise. He turned to Matthew. "Have you hired an additional physical therapist?" "I haven't received any reports." Matthew hesitated, suddenly feeling defensive. "Actually, Emily is Lucas's nanny. She has personal experience with similar cases and has developed an alternative approach that seems to be working." The doctor frowned, looking at Emily with new attention. "What is your training, miss?" "I don't have academic training in healthcare, doctor," she replied with quiet dignity. "My knowledge comes from experience with my brother, who has cerebral palsy, and years of observing and adapting physical therapy techniques to our reality." "I see," said the doctor, his tone revealing some reservation. "Matthew, can we talk privately for a moment?" In the corridor adjacent to the office, Dr. Henry didn't hide his concern. "Matthew, I understand your hope when seeing progress, but I need to warn you about the risks. Interventions not supervised by qualified professionals can cause long-term damage, especially in complex cases like Lucas's." "I'm aware of the theoretical risks," replied Matthew, keeping his voice low, "but the results speak for themselves. In 2 months with Emily, Lucas has progressed more than in years of conventional therapies." "Immediate results don't always mean lasting benefits," argued the doctor. "There may be joint overload, inadequate muscular compensations, unrealistic expectations that lead to future frustrations. Without proper technical monitoring—" "What if there was such monitoring?" interrupted Matthew. "If a qualified professional supervised Emily's work, validated her techniques, guided adjustments when necessary?" Henry pondered. "It would be an unconventional arrangement, but potentially beneficial, as long as it's well structured. I can recommend some physical therapists specializing in pediatric neurology. Please do that. Meanwhile, I authorize the continuation of the current work. The progress is undeniable, Henry. You saw it with your own eyes." Back in the office, they found Lucas proudly showing Emily how he could bend his knee at a greater angle than before. The scene perfectly captured what was at stake. Not just physical gains, but the self-esteem and joy of a child discovering new possibilities. On the way back home, Matthew drove in silence, processing the consultation. Lucas had fallen asleep, In the back seat, exhausted from the evaluation session. "The doctor didn't approve of my methods," commented Emily quietly, breaking the silence. "It's understandable. He follows protocols, bases himself on scientific evidence, certifications. And you? What do you think?" Matthew reflected before answering. "I think that results are also evidence. Lucas is stronger, more confident, happier. That has immeasurable value." Emily smiled discreetly, looking out the window. "Thank you for your trust. Still," he continued, "we're going to add professional supervision. Dr. Henry will recommend a physical therapist to validate and complement your work. It's not distrust, it's optimization." "I completely agree," she replied, surprising him. "I've always wanted to learn more, have technical guidance. It will be a growth opportunity for me, too." That same afternoon, Matthew's secretary, Patricia, entered his office with a concerned expression. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Deborah Prentice from Global Investments is on the phone. She seems quite anxious to speak with you." Matthew sighed. Deborah represented an investment fund that was negotiating a significant stake in Harrison Tech. The meeting in London, weeks ago, had been precisely to finalize these details. "Matthew, we need a definitive position," said Deborah without preamble, when he answered. "The board meets tomorrow to deliberate on the investment. If you can't come personally to New York for the signing, we at least need an extensive video conference tonight." "Tonight?" Matthew checked his watch. He had promised Lucas they would watch a movie together after dinner. Wouldn't it be possible to reschedule for early tomorrow, considering the time difference? The silence on the other end of the line was eloquent. "Matthew, we're talking about $30 million. The board has other projects in line. If we don't demonstrate commitment now, they'll simply move on to the next opportunity." "I understand." Matthew massaged his temples, feeling the familiar dilemma between professional and personal obligations. "I'll be available at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. I'll ask my team to prepare all the necessary documentation." Upon hanging up, he remained motionless for a few seconds, contemplating the photograph of Lucas on his desk, a formal image taken in a studio, not a spontaneous memory of shared moments. "Patricia," he called through the intercom, "please let them know at home that I'll be late today. I'll have an important video conference at 9. When he arrived home around 7, he found Lucas in the living room with Emily, both involved in building a sort of circuit with cushions, books, and toys. "Dad!" exclaimed the boy upon seeing him. "We're making an obstacle course. We're going to watch The Lion King afterward, right?" Matthew felt a tightness in his chest. "Son, something came up at work. I have a very important meeting tonight." Lucas's smile instantly disappeared. "But you promised." "I know, and I'm sorry. I promised to make it up this weekend. We can watch 2 movies. How about that?" Lucas didn't respond, returning his attention to the cushion circuit, but his small, drooping shoulders revealed his disappointment. Emily observed the scene discreetly without interfering. During dinner, Matthew tried to make animated conversation, but Lucas responded only with monosyllables. When the boy went to prepare for bed, Emily approached Matthew in the living room. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison. I know it's none of my business, but promises are very important to children, especially coming from significant figures like parents." Matthew felt a twinge of irritation. "I'm aware of that, Miss Rivera. Unfortunately, the real world sometimes imposes difficult choices. This meeting could define the future of the company." "I perfectly understand," she replied without backing down. "I just thought I should mention that Lucas spent the whole day talking about the movie with his father. He even refused Mrs. Wilson's offer to watch it in the afternoon because he wanted it to be special. With you." The words hit Matthew like a punch to the stomach. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated. It was Renata, advising that the technical team was ready for the video conference and needed to do preliminary tests. "I need to go," he said, divided. "Please tell Lucas that you love him and that broken promises don't mean less love," completed Emily gently. "I know. And he knows too, deep down. Children are more understanding than we imagine." Matthew nodded, grateful for the unexpected understanding. He headed to his son's room, finding him already in bed, hugging the teddy bear he had received on his last birthday. "Hey, champion," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I came to say goodnight before my meeting." Lucas looked at him with slightly teary eyes. "It's okay, Dad. Emily said that sometimes adults have important things to do." "Yes, but that doesn't mean you're not the most important thing to me," replied Matthew, surprising himself with the sincerity of his own statement. "How about if tomorrow I leave work earlier and we watch the movie?" "Do you really promise?" "I promise. And this time I'm going to keep it, no matter what it takes." The video conference with the investors extended deep into the night. Technical issues, contractual disagreements, renegotiation of terms. Matthew remained focused, but part of his mind wandered to the promise he had made to his son. At 3:30 in the morning, when they finally reached an agreement, Deborah seemed satisfied. "We need you in New York next week to finalize the details in person, Matthew. The meeting is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. Matthew hesitated for just a second. "I'll need to check my schedule, Deborah. I have pressing personal commitments in the coming days." The executive's surprise was evident. Matthew Harrison refusing an in-person meeting due to personal commitments? That's new. "I'm not refusing, I'm asking for flexibility. Can we do it on Friday or the following week?" After some negotiation, they agreed on Friday. Matthew ended the video call, exhausted, but with a strange feeling of victory. Not just for the commercial agreement, but for having for the first time put the needs of his family in the equation. The next morning, despite the poorly slept night, he got up determined. Upon entering the kitchen for coffee, he found Lucas, already at the table, animatedly chatting with Emily about the obstacle course they had built. "Good morning," greeted Matthew, serving himself coffee. "How are the plans for today?" "We have a strengthening session in the morning and cognitive activities in the afternoon," replied Emily. "And Dr. Henry called. He recommended Dr. Amanda Richards for technical supervision. She can come on Thursday for an initial assessment." "Excellent," approved Matthew. Then he turned to his son. "And as for us, Lucas, how about watching that movie at 6 in the evening? I'm going to leave the office early." The boy's radiant smile was the best response he could receive. That day, for the first time in years, Matthew Harrison left the office precisely at 5, ignoring surprised looks from his team. On the way home, he stopped to buy popcorn, soda, and other snacks for the improvised movie session. Small gestures that, he realized, made all the difference in building something much more valuable than any million-dollar contract, the relationship with his son. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The arrival of Dr. Amanda Richards at the Harrison mansion stirred up the household routine. A physical therapist specializing in pediatric neurological rehabilitation, she brought with her not only the prestige of solid training, but also sophisticated evaluation equipment. Matthew made a point of being present, rearranging his schedule to attend the first consultation. "Dr. Harrison, it's a pleasure to meet you in person," greeted Amanda, a woman of about 40, with a professional posture and attentive gaze. "Dr. Henry briefed me on Lucas's case and this unusual situation." Matthew noticed the hesitation in her voice when referring to Emily, who was waiting with Lucas in the living room, preparing him for the evaluation. "An unusual situation, but with promising results," he replied, leading her inside. "I hope you'll keep an open mind before forming any judgments." "I always do," she assured with a restrained smile. "Science advances precisely when we challenge assumptions." In the living room, Lucas greeted the new doctor with curiosity, while Emily maintained a respectfully withdrawn posture. The physical therapist initiated a battery of standardized tests, measuring range of motion, muscle strength, coordination, and balance. Her notes were meticulous, her expression professional and neutral. "Now, Lucas, I'd like to see the exercises you usually do with Miss Rivera," requested Amanda after the initial evaluation. "Can you show me a typical session?" Emily looked at Matthew, who nodded encouragingly. With a naturalness born of daily practice, she began the routine she had developed. Matthew carefully observed the physical therapist's reactions, a raised Eyebrow here, a discreet nod there, frequent notes on her clipboard. After an hour of demonstration, Amanda asked to speak with everyone together. Well, I have some preliminary observations. Her professional tone revealed neither approval nor disapproval. Lucas shows significant gains in trunk control and lower limb strength compared to previous reports. The methodology applied by Miss Rivera, though unconventional in some aspects, demonstrates consistency and logical progression. Matthew felt a wave of relief, while Emily remained calm but visibly tense. There are, however, some important adjustments to be made, continued Amanda. Some exercises need modifications to avoid postural compensations that could generate future problems, and it would be beneficial to add specific techniques to improve pelvic shoulder dissociation and proprioceptive work. Could you guide me on these techniques? Asked Emily, her tone revealing genuine professional interest. Amanda studied her for a moment. I can. In fact, I'm curious about how you developed this approach. Some of the exercises I saw are similar to advanced neurological rehabilitation techniques. I learned by observing my brother's therapists and adapting to our reality, explained Emily. When we didn't have access to specific equipment, I had to improvise with what was available. Intelligent improvisation, commented Amanda, with growing respect. I'd like to meet your brother and better understand his evolution. It would be valuable as a comparative study for Lucas's case. Michael will be in Austin next weekend, informed Emily. I'm sure he'd be happy to meet you. Matthew, who was following the professional dialogue between the two women, suddenly felt like an external observer. There was a technical connection. There, a shared language that transcended degrees and certifications. I propose the following, said Amanda, turning to Matthew. I can supervise Miss Rivera's work weekly, make adjustments to the program, and add complementary techniques. If you agree, I'd like to document this case for possible future publication, with guaranteed anonymity, obviously. Publication. Matthew didn't hide his surprise. The method empirically developed by Miss Rivera, with proper technical adjustments, could represent an innovative approach for similar cases, especially in contexts of limited resources or regions without access to specialized centers. The meeting ended with a structured collaboration plan between Emily and Amanda. Lucas, oblivious to the professional implications of the conversation, was simply happy to have earned the approval of the new doctor, as he called her. Later, after accompanying Amanda to the door, Matthew found Emily in the garden, organizing materials they had used during the demonstration. It seems your techniques impressed even the specialists, he commented, helping her collect some therapeutic balls. I'm relieved, she admitted. I've always been afraid of doing something wrong, even seeing the positive results. Dr. Amanda's professional guidance will be invaluable. Matthew observed her for a moment, realizing how he had underestimated the young woman from the first day. Why did you never pursue training in the field? You clearly have a natural talent. A shadow passed over Emily's face. Not all of us are born with the same opportunities, Mr. Harrison. Please call me Matthew. After everything you've done for Lucas, I think we're past formality. She smiled discreetly. Circumstances haven't always allowed me to follow that path. When my father passed away, my mother fell ill soon after. The diagnosis of fibromyalgia came along with deep depression. I had to take over the house at 17, caring for her and Michael. It must have been extremely difficult. It was our reality, Emily shrugged. I got a partial scholarship for education, but had to drop out in my second year. The medical expenses, the mortgage. Working as a nanny allowed flexible hours to accompany Michael to therapies. Matthew felt growing admiration for this woman who, despite all obstacles, had never stopped fighting and learning. And your brother? How did he manage to get to university? Emily's face lit up with pride. Michael has always been brilliant. Even in the most difficult moments of rehabilitation, he never stopped studying. He earned a full scholarship through his SAT scores and secured a spot in adapted student housing. He's stubborn as a mule, never accepts limitations. She laughed, softly. I think Lucas has a lot of him in that aspect. Maybe that's why you connected so well, observed Matthew. You see in Lucas the same potential you saw in your brother. Yes, but I also see something unique in him. Lucas has a quiet determination, an inner strength that many adults don't possess. Matthew's phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Renata, his operations director, reminding him of the trip to New York on Friday. He silenced the device, determined to remain present in that conversation. You know, Emily, I've observed that you keep meticulous records of Lucas's progress. By any chance, do you have plans for this data? Actually, I have a personal project, she confessed, a slight blush tinging her cheeks. I've been compiling accessible methodologies for families without resources, exercises that can be done at home, with simple materials, early stimulation techniques. The idea is to create a practical manual based on our experience with Michael, and now with Lucas. An extraordinary project, commented Matthew, genuinely impressed. Have you considered transforming it into something bigger? A book perhaps, or a digital platform? Emily laughed as if the idea were absurd. That would require resources I don't have, plus academic credibility. Resources can be obtained, and as for credibility, Matthew paused, considering something that was beginning to take shape in his mind. Harrison Tech has a division of assistive technologies. We're always looking for innovative methodologies to implement in our virtual rehabilitation platform. What are you suggesting? I'm not entirely sure yet, he admitted, but your practical knowledge, combined with our technology and scientific validation from professionals like Dr. Amanda, it could benefit thousands of families. Before Emily could respond, Lucas appeared at the door leading to the garden, supported by his crutches but visibly excited. Dad, Em, can we play that board game you bought? He asked, referring to the educational game that Matthew had brought from his last trip to downtown Austin. Of course, champion, replied Matthew, standing up. Shall we go to the living room? As they accompanied Lucas, Emily lightly touched Matthew's arm. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For believing. Not just in Lucas, but in me. That evening marked a subtle but significant change in the household's dynamics. During the board game, amid laughter and small celebrations for each advancement, Matthew realized they were forming something that transcended the employer-employee relationship. A mutual respect was being born there, based not on social or professional hierarchies, but on shared values and common goals. On Friday, before embarking for New York, Matthew left an envelope on the kitchen table addressed to Emily. Inside was a formal letter offering a full scholarship for any healthcare course of her choice, with flexible hours so she could continue her work with Lucas. Along with the letter, a contract significantly increasing her salary and modifying her official function to child development therapist. Upon returning from his trip 3 days later, he found a handwritten response on his desk. Emily accepted the scholarship for physical therapy, but politely declined the salary increase and title change. I don't do this for money or status, she had written. I do it because I believe in Lucas's potential and the difference I can make. If you want to invest resources, I suggest directing them toward the manual project we mentioned. With proper guidance, we could develop something truly transformative for families without access to specialized treatments. Matthew smiled, recognizing in those words the same determination and principles that he was beginning to deeply admire. Emily Rivera wasn't just the nanny who was helping his son overcome physical limitations. She was a transformative force who, without realizing it, was rebuilding values and priorities in his own life. That same night, while putting Lucas to bed, the boy asked an unexpected question. Dad, can Emily stay with us forever? The innocent question resonated disturbingly in Matthew's mind. What exactly was his son asking? And why did the idea provoke such contradictory sensations in his chest? She's our employee, son. She's here to help you. But she's more than that, insisted Lucas, with the disconcerting clarity of children. She's like family. Family. The word echoed in Matthew's mind long after Lucas fell asleep. Sitting in his office with an untouched glass of wine, He found himself reflecting on how his definition of family had transformed in recent weeks. Since Maria's departure, he had turned the mansion into a functional, almost corporate environment, with efficient but emotionally distant employees. Now, however, the house was beginning to come alive. There was laughter during meals, movie sessions on Friday nights, small celebrations for each of Lucas's progress. And at the center of this transformation was Emily, not only for her work with his son, but for the way her presence had catalyzed a change in his own way of being a father. Like family, murmured Matthew to himself, trying to understand what he was really feeling. The professional admiration for Emily's work was beginning to blend with something more personal, more complex, something he wasn't prepared to name, but that was definitely present, silently growing with each interaction, each shared moment. 3 months passed since Dr. Amanda's first evaluation. Fall was beginning to color the trees in the Harrison Mansion's garden, and with it, significant changes were also blossoming in the lives of its inhabitants. The therapeutic manual project that Emily had mentioned was taking shape, now with technical backing and resources provided by Matthew. The initial idea had transformed into an accessible digital platform, combining videos, illustrations, and detailed instructions for families of children with special needs. On that Saturday morning, the backyard of the mansion was decorated for a small celebration. Colorful balloons, a table with snacks, and a cake with 5 candles announced Lucas's birthday. Not a grand party with dozens of guests as Matthew used to organize. Breaking tradition, the boy had asked for something more intimate, just with people who really matter, in his words. "Is everything ready?" Matthew asked Mrs. Wilson, who was giving the final touches to the table. "Yes, doctor. The guests should arrive in half an hour," replied the housekeeper, still getting used to the new dynamics of the house. The boss, previously always formal and distant, now actively participated in domestic matters, came home earlier from work and, most surprisingly, smiled frequently. "Great. I'll see if Lucas is ready." In the hallway leading to his son's room, Matthew heard animated voices. The partially open door allowed him to observe without being noticed. Lucas was sitting on the edge of the bed, while Emily adjusted the laces of his new shoes, a special model with extra support for the ankles. "Do you think I'll be able to do it?" asked the boy, a mix of anxiety and expectation in his voice. "I'm absolutely certain," replied Emily, finalizing the bow. "We've been practicing for weeks for this moment. Your muscles are much stronger, your balance has improved tremendously. And remember, whatever the result, what matters is the attempt." Will Dad be proud? Your father is already proud, Lucas. Each small step you take, each effort you make, all of this fills his heart with pride. Matthew felt his throat tighten with emotion. Emily was right. His pride in his son had transformed into something much deeper in recent months. It was no longer based on expectations or comparisons, but on genuine recognition of the boy's courage and determination. "May I come in?" he asked, lightly knocking on the door. "Dad!" Lucas turned excitedly. "Is it almost time? Have they arrived yet?" "Not yet, champion, but it shouldn't be long." Matthew sat beside his son, while Emily discreetly stood up to give them privacy. "I'll check the final details outside," she said, heading to the door. "Emily," called Matthew, "thank you for everything. For organizing this, for everything, really." She smiled, that sincere smile that illuminated her brown eyes. "It's a pleasure, Matthew." The use of his first name, once so strange, now flowed naturally between them. Lucas deserves every moment of happiness. When she left, the boy looked at his father with a conspiratorial expression. "She doesn't know about the surprise, right?" "No, it will be a surprise for everyone," assured Matthew, winking. "Are you ready for your big moment?" Lucas nodded, determined. "I'm a little nervous, but Emily says that's normal." "Nervousness is just the body preparing itself to do something important," agreed Matthew, repeating a phrase he had heard Emily say countless times during therapeutic sessions. "Let's go. Our guests must be arriving." The garden gradually filled with the small selected group: Mrs. Clara and Michael, Emily's mother and brother, Dr. Amanda, who had become a regular presence in the house, Renata, the operations director, who had developed a special affection for Lucas on the occasions when the boy visited his father's office, and Peter, a schoolmate who shared Lucas's interest in dinosaurs and didn't mind his physical limitations. Michael, at 22, moved around the garden with the support of light canes, animatedly conversing with Matthew about assistive technologies. The young computer science student had proved to be a prodigy in programming, developing innovative solutions for digital accessibility. "Your idea of adapting the motion recognition system for varying levels of mobility is brilliant," commented Matthew. "We could incorporate that into the next platform update." "It would be an honor to collaborate," replied Michael. "And speaking of collaborations," he cast a meaningful look at Emily, who was helping Lucas receive the guests. "My sister is really impressive in this manual project. I've never seen her so enthusiastic." Matthew followed his gaze, observing the naturalness with which Emily interacted with everyone. Professional without being distant, warm without losing composure. "She has a special gift," he agreed, "not just for therapy itself, but for connecting with people, seeing potential where others see only limitations." "She's always been like that," commented Michael with fraternal affection. "Even when everything seemed impossible for me, Emily never gave up. She believed I could have a full life long before I believed it myself." The celebration proceeded with the simple joy of genuine moments. Lucas, the center of attention, seemed to flourish with each congratulation, each hug, each word of affection. After the cake and presents, Matthew asked for everyone's attention, positioning himself beside his son. "Before we end this very special celebration, Lucas has something he would like to show." He knelt beside the boy, who nervously held his crutches. "Ready, son?" Lucas nodded, looking at Emily, who, among the guests, still didn't understand what was about to happen. In recent weeks, besides the regular sessions with Emily and Dr. Amanda, Lucas has been practicing something in secret, explained Matthew to those present. Something he wanted to keep as a surprise for this special day. The boy handed the crutches to his father, and to the astonishment of almost everyone present, took a step forward, alone, without support. Then another step, and another. His steps were cautious, slightly unstable, but unequivocally independent. The initial silence transformed into expressions of amazement and contained emotion. Mrs. Clara brought her hands to her mouth, eyes watering. Michael smiled, encouragingly waving to the little one. But it was Emily's reaction that Matthew sought with his eyes. She remained motionless, silent tears streaming down her face, an expression of pure pride illuminating her eyes. When Lucas completed 6 steps and stopped, breathless but victorious, directly in front of her, Emily knelt to be at his height. "Happy birthday, Em," said Lucas, hugging her tightly. "You always say that gifts are better when they come from the heart. This is my gift to you." The young woman returned the hug, unable to contain her emotion. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received," she whispered, her voice choked. Applause erupted spontaneously. It wasn't just for Lucas's physical achievement, but for the extraordinary journey that everyone there was witnessing, a journey of overcoming, confidence, and above all, love. Later, when most of the guests had already left, Matthew found Emily, sitting on the garden swing, contemplating the sky that was beginning to display its first stars. Lucas was sleeping exhausted after the excitement of the day, watched over by Mrs. Wilson, who had insisted on staying to help with the cleanup. "May I join you?" asked Matthew, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "Of course," she replied, accepting the drink. It was a perfect day, wasn't it? More than perfect. He sat on the swing beside her. It was a day of realizing dreams I didn't even know I could have. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, just enjoying the soft evening breeze. "When you arrived at my house that day I came back early from London," began Matthew, "I thought I had found just a dedicated nanny, maybe even an informal therapist. I never imagined I was meeting someone who would completely change our lives." Emily smiled, eyes fixed on the stars. "It's funny how life works, isn't it? I came to work here because I needed the job. My last employer moved abroad, I was nervous, insecure, afraid of not meeting the expectations of a family so different from mine. And you ended up not only meeting but completely transforming our expectations, he completed. Lucas is not the same boy. I'm not the same man. This house is not the same place. You've transformed me too, she admitted. Seeing Lucas progressing, witnessing your dedication as a father, that gave me the courage I needed to resume my own dreams. The physical therapy program starts next semester, and the digital manual project already has interest from 3 publishers. Matthew contemplated her delicate profile against the night sky. The woman beside him was a force of nature, disguised as gentleness, determined, brilliant, compassionate. He felt a wave of gratitude mixed with something deeper, something that had been quietly growing over the months. I have a proposal for you, he said finally. Another scholarship? Joked Emily, turning to face him. Not exactly. Matthew took a deep breath. Harrison Tech is creating a new division of accessible assistive technologies focused on solutions for families with limited resources. Your manual will be the first project, but we want to expand to apps, low-cost adapted devices, support platforms. Sounds amazing, she commented, genuinely interested. We need someone to lead this division, someone who understands not just the technical aspect, but the human reality behind each need. Someone with vision, empathy, and practical knowledge. Emily raised her eyebrows, understanding what he was suggesting. Matthew, I don't have formal qualifications for a position at that level. I haven't even started college yet. Formal qualifications can be acquired with time and resources. What you have, lived experience, deep understanding, capacity for innovation, that can't be taught at any university. He paused, seeking the right words. I'm not offering this as a favor or a gesture of gratitude. It's a strategic business decision. You're the right person for this role. And Lucas? She asked, revealing her main concern. I can't simply abandon the work we've started. I wouldn't ask that. His follow-up would continue now with support from Dr. Amanda and the team that you yourself would help form. It would be a gradual transition, respecting the special bond you've built. Emily remained silent, processing the proposal. It was an opportunity she had never imagined possible, to impact the lives of thousands of families, transform her empirical knowledge into accessible solutions, build a meaningful career doing what she loved. I'd need to think about it, she finally said. It's a huge change. Of course, take all the time you need. Matthew smiled. After all, the best decisions aren't made on impulse. In the distance, they heard Lucas calling. Instinctively, both stood up, ready to attend to the boy. He probably woke up and doesn't remember where he is, commented Emily. There were a lot of emotions today. They walked together across the grass toward the illuminated house. On the way, their fingers touched briefly, a subtle contact, perhaps accidental, but loaded with meanings not yet expressed in words. Upon reaching the room, they found Lucas sitting in bed, rubbing his sleepy eyes. I had a dream, he murmured. I dreamed that the 3 of us were on a beach, and I was running on the sand. A beautiful dream, commented Emily, adjusting the blanket. It wasn't just a dream, said the boy with the disconcerting clarity of children. It was the future. Emily said that if I believe in something very much and work hard, it can become reality. Matthew and Emily exchanged a meaningful look over the headboard of the bed. Your Em is right, confirmed Matthew, sitting beside his son. Dreams can become reality when we believe in them with enough strength. Then it will happen, declared Lucas with absolute conviction, because I believe a lot, and you believe too, right? Yes, champion, replied Matthew, extending his hand to intertwine his fingers with Emily's over the blanket. We believe. In that moment, contemplating his son's sleepy smile and Emily's delicate hand in his, Matthew understood that the real turnaround in his life hadn't been finding a solution for Lucas's physical limitations. The real transformation was in rediscovering the meaning of family, priorities, human connection. The mansion that was once just a symbol of his professional success had finally transformed into a home. A space for growth, overcoming, and above all, possibilities. And it had all begun on that night when, Returning early from a trip, he had seen for the first time what really mattered. A small boy determined to stand. A generous young woman, willing to believe. A father rediscovering the way back home. 3 lives intertwined by destiny, transformed by the power of mutual trust, building together a future that none of them could have imagined alone. A future where limitations were just starting points for new possibilities. A future that, as Lucas had said with